Bryan Barrett joins us on line 6. Bryan Barrett of WGNS. He called the Smyrna-Oakland game tonight. Bryan, a good ball game, a game that started out pretty even, but Oakland's flexed their muscles, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, especially after the in the second quarter started flexing their muscle a little bit, and took a 2-touchdown lead into halftime. Took the opening drive in the second half, and Smyrna's John Turner, quarterback, goes out, and then things began to snowball on the Bulldogs. Oakland scored 42 unanswered in the game to win it.
Oakland finishes the regular season 10-0. They get the opportunity really to put a stamp on a dominant regular season, and they did it in fitting style, didn't they?
Well, they did. We figured it out tonight, and I can't recall whether it was 7 or 8 games, and Rod Edwards mentioned this during our broadcast, that 7 or 8 of their games were mercy rule games in the clock ran. So that tells you what kind of season they had against a really tough region and a pretty tough non-region slate as well. You're talking about teams like Hillsboro and the non-region games. And so I really think that they had an outstanding year so far, and they're going to take that momentum into the playoffs.
We're talking to Bryan Barrett of WGNS. He is the voice of sports, and of course WGNS is the voice of news and the voice of the community in Rutherford County. Bryan called the Oakland-Smyrna game tonight, which in effect we thought early on was going to be the Region 2 championship, but it actually turned out to be the Oakland coronation tonight, didn't it?
Well, and a lot of that had to do with Riverdale's win over Smyrna last week. That took that off the plate. And earlier in the year, that made, and before the season started, we thought it was Oakland 1, Smyrna 2. I mean, that was preseason prognostication. Well, Blackman beat Smyrna earlier in the season, so that solidified their 2 hole. And then with Blackman, Riverdale winning last week, that kind of put Smyrna in a tough spot here tonight. So they've got some injuries to deal with. Last week, Blake Watkins was hurt in with shoulder stinger, and so that kind of sidelined him tonight. So they were down a running back, and then in the second half, when you're down your starting quarterback and, a great player, great kid, that just made it real tough on them, taking on maybe one of the best defenses in the state.
Dennis Weaver here at Keith talking to Bryan Barrett on the Friday Night Thunder Scoreboard Show.
Bryan, if you were a betting man, how deep do you think Oakland goes in the playoffs?
I would be surprised if you're not seeing Maryville and Oakland in the semifinals at Ray Hughes Stadium the day after Thanksgiving. I really think a lot of people expect to see that matchup. I know there are a lot of games to play and a lot of really good teams in there, but those are going to be the 2 favorites. And when you get to that game, you never know. Maryville is the team to beat in the East until they're beaten. They were beaten in the state championship game, but they got there last year. So I think Oakland will be very hungry if they're in that game taking on the Rebels.
And I think you got to like Oakland's chances at home the night after Thanksgiving. Bryan, what game are you doing next week?
I don't really know. I'm kind of looking at it and trying to plot out the bracket to see what games to do. We try to do the best games that we can do and also spread the wealth around a little bit. Maybe Blackman, Jefferson County, could be Riverdale, Bearden. Those are probably the top 2 in contention. And 4 or 5 games are awfully good to do sometimes as well with Smyrna and Dobbins-Bennett. So we'll make that decision in the morning when John and I conference together around donuts.
Well, that's the best conference there is. You guys take care. Tell folks how they can listen, and I guess it's going to be a great coaches show tomorrow morning.
Yeah, we'll have a full slate. We'll say goodbye to some of our coaches who won't be in the postseason, but we'll do that beginning at 8 tomorrow morning. Prentice Falls Heating and Air Coaches Corner fueled by Donut Country, starting at 8 tomorrow morning with a full slate of coaches for 3 hours, and looking forward to that and talking playoffs with some, and so it'll be a fun time. And hey, will you tell Rusty that there's no excuse to run out of ink in Shelbyville when the pen company's in town? I mean, there's no excuse.
I wonder if they still have 1 million pin companies over there. We'll talk about that with him off next time we talk to him. Okay.
All right, sounds good.
All righty. That is Bryan Barrett of WGNS. Let's